The echo of a song. A millionaire's lost hope. Warning. What you're about to hear is a tale of unimaginable loss, a dark secret, and a child's unwavering hope that shatters a family's grief. This isn't just a story. It's a desperate search for truth in the shadows of deception. If you're ready to dive into this emotional roller coaster, subscribe to our channel right now and hit that like button. And trust me, you'll want to comment your thoughts below as this mystery unfolds. Part 1. A mansion's silent grief. Clara Harrison hadn't touched the piano in 3 months. Each morning, she'd pass the grand instrument on her way to the kitchen, but her fingers no longer remembered the melodies that once filled the mansion. Silence had become her sole companion since they buried Lucy. She still prepared breakfast at 7, just as she always had. 2 cups of coffee, though she knew Ethan would barely touch his, and toast that would grow cold on the plate. Routine kept her sane, or so she believed. "Still poring over those papers?" she asked, entering the study, finding her husband surrounded by hospital documents. Ethan Reynolds looked up. His eyes held the same dark circles that had deepened over the past months. As the owner of 3 successful textile factories, he was used to solving problems, but this was different. This had no solution. "Something's not right, Clara. The timelines don't match. The signatures look off." "Enough!" she cried, scattering the documents to the floor. "Our daughter is dead. Why can't you accept it?" The chasm between them had become an abyss. Clara craved to weep and move on. Ethan desperately needed answers no one would provide. The money he'd poured into private investigators, the contacts he'd pressured, the calls to doctors in other countries. None of it had yielded a single lead. Part 2. The doctor's secret harvest. On the other side of the city, Dr. Eris Thorne reviewed files in his private clinic. His office, adorned with university degrees and medical awards, reflected 30 years of gynecological success. But some files remained locked in a special drawer. The phone rang. It was his assistant. "Doctor, Mrs. Andrews called. She says the child is sick again." Thorne frowned. The Andrews had been meticulous for 5 years, but lately little Violet had been asking too many questions. Dangerous questions. "Tell her to increase the medication dose and not to leave the house with the child until further notice." He hung up and opened the secret drawer. Inside were photographs of couples with babies, signed contracts, and a list of names. Project Genesis had been his masterpiece. A perfect business where wealthy families paid for genetic studies using twins separated at birth. The biological parents never knew they'd had 2 children. Meanwhile, in a modest house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, Violet Andrews woke up drenched in sweat. She dreamed again of the big house, the piano, and the weeping woman. The same dreams she'd had since she was little. "Mom, Eleanor," she said to the woman who had raised her, "why don't you ever take me to meet my real parents?" Eleanor Andrews felt a knot in her stomach. For 5 years she'd avoided the question, but Violet was growing more persistent. "I already told you, honey, your parents, they can't take care of you. But I see them in my dreams. They live in a house with lots of windows, and there's a brown piano in the living room." Eleanor paled. Dr. Thorne had assured them the medication would prevent these connections. Clearly, he had lied. That night, as the Andrews slept, Violet made a decision. She quietly rose, put on her favorite dress, and slipped out of the house. What do you think is driving Violet to find these dream parents? Is it just a child's imagination, or something more profound? Tell us in the comments. Part 3. A ghost at the door. Sound of rain and distant thunder. The rain began after she'd been walking for 2 hours, but she didn't stop. Something inside her guided her toward the place she knew she belonged. 3 hours later, she arrived at the Reynolds mansion. Its lights were on, and she could hear voices arguing inside. Without hesitation, she knocked. When Ethan opened the door, he froze. The little girl standing before him was identical to Lucy. The same eyes, the same hair, the same shy smile. "Daddy?" Violet asked. "I've never missed home so much." Clara appeared behind Ethan and, seeing the child, collapsed. Ethan carried her as Violet watched, worried. "Don't cry, Mommy," the little girl said. I'm home now. Ethan hadn't slept all night. He watched Violet from the living room armchair, while the child rested on the sofa wrapped in a blanket. Every time she breathed, he reassured himself it was real. Clara had returned to her room after fainting, refusing to discuss what had happened. At dawn, Violet awoke and stretched as if she'd slept in her own bed all her life. "Good morning, Daddy," she said naturally. "Is Mommy awake yet?" "Violet." Ethan sat on the edge of the sofa. "I need you to tell me the truth. Who are the Andrews?" The child sat up and looked at him seriously, an expression too mature for her 5 years. "Eleanor and Robert. They say they're my parents, but I know it's not true. Eleanor always cries when I ask about you too, and Robert gets very angry. They give me pills that make me sleep, but last night I didn't take them." "Pills?" Ethan felt a jolt of alarm. "Why do they give you pills?" "They say it's so I don't have nightmares, but they're not nightmares, Daddy. They're memories." Violet lowered her voice. "I remember when Mommy used to sing to me by the piano. I remember the smell of your books in the study. I remember my sister." Ethan remained motionless. "Your sister? Lucy. She's sad because she can't come home with me. The men in white coats won't let her leave the room." Ethan's hands trembled. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Greg, it's Ethan Reynolds. I need to see you right now. It's urgent." Part 4. The Investigator's Skepticism. Greg Stone had been a police officer for 20 years before opening his private investigation agency. He was the only person Ethan fully trusted. He arrived at the mansion an hour later, with his toolkit and notebook always ready. "This is the child you told me about?" he asked, seeing Violet calmly eating breakfast in the kitchen. "Greg, I need you to tell me if I'm going crazy," Ethan murmured. "That child knows things only Lucy knew." Greg approached Violet cautiously. He'd seen many strange things in his career, but this surpassed everything. "Hello, little one. Can you tell me your full name?" "Violet Andrews," she replied. "But that's not my real name. My real name is Violet Reynolds." "And where did you live before coming here?" "In an ugly house with bars on the windows. Robert is always watching TV, and Eleanor cleans all day. They said you didn't want me, but I knew they were lying." Greg exchanged a look with Ethan. He pulled out his notebook and began taking notes. "Do you remember the address of that house?" Violet closed her eyes and concentrated. "Moreland Street, number 42. There's a corner store called the Corner Pantry. I'm going to investigate those Andrews," Greg told Ethan in a low voice. "Meanwhile, don't let the child leave the house. If what I suspect is true, this is bigger than you imagine." That afternoon, while Greg conducted his investigations, Violet asked to see her room. Ethan led her to the second floor, to what had been Lucy's room. The room remained exactly as it was the day she died. Toys neatly arranged, clothes folded, books on the shelf. Violet entered as if she'd been there 1,000 times. She went directly to the closet and moved some boxes until she found a loose board on the floor. Beneath it was a small wooden chest. "I kept my treasures here," she said, opening the chest. Inside were drawings made by Lucy, a bracelet Clara had given her, and a crumpled letter addressed to Mom and Dad. Ethan read the letter with tears in his eyes. It was Lucy's handwriting, but the words spoke of missing her family and wanting to come home. "How is this possible?" he murmured. "Because we're the same person, Daddy. Only I was taken far away, and she stayed close but hidden." At that moment, Greg returned with news that would change everything. Part 5. A Shocking Revelation. "Ethan, you need to sit down," Greg said gravely. "The Andrews don't exist. Their identification documents are fake. The address the child gave me is for an abandoned house, and there's something else." "What?" "I found records of monthly payments from a bank account in the name of Dr. Eris Thorne, the same doctor who attended Clara's delivery." Ethan felt the world sway beneath his feet. The doctor who had certified Lucy's death was paying Violet's supposed adoptive parents. "There's more," Greg continued. "I checked the hospital records from that night again. Officially, Clara gave birth to a single girl who died from complications, but a nurse who no longer works there told me something interesting off the record. What did she say? That there was a lot of unusual activity that night. Too many doctors for a single birth, too many ambulances, too much secrecy, and that Dr. Thorne took something away in a portable incubator. Violet, who had been listening from the stairs, rushed down to them. "Are you going to look for Lucy now?" she asked urgently. "She talks to me in dreams. She says she's scared and wants to come home." Clara hadn't left her room in 2 days. Since seeing Violet, she had locked herself in and only opened the door to receive the food Ethan left for her. The sound of the piano remained absent from the mansion. Violet, for her part, had adapted to the house as if she had never left. She knew every corner, every piece of furniture, every photograph. But that morning, she woke with a high fever and tremors. Do you believe Lucy could truly be alive? What would you do next if you were Ethan or Clara? Share your thoughts below. Part 6. A Mark of Truth. "Daddy," she told Ethan in a weak voice. "My whole body hurts, and I'm seeing strange things." Ethan touched her forehead. The child was burning up. Without a second thought, he carried her to the nearest hospital. Dr. Pamela Watson was a renowned pediatrician in the city. She had treated Lucy during her first years of life, so when she saw Ethan enter with Violet, she was speechless. "Ethan, how is this possible?" she murmured as she examined the child. "It's a long story, doctor. Just tell me what's wrong with her." Dr. Watson carefully examined Violet. The child showed all the signs of medication withdrawal. Her pupils were dilated, she trembled constantly, and her nervous system seemed agitated. "This child has been taking sedatives for a long time," she explained. "Her body is reacting to the lack of the drug. She needs hydration and observation." While preparing the doctor noticed something familiar. She pushed Violet's hair aside to check behind her left ear. There it was, a small, crescent moon-shaped birthmark. "Ethan," she called, her voice trembling. "Come here." "What is it?" "This mark." Lucy had the exact same mark in the same place. It's impossible for it to be a coincidence. Ethan approached and saw the small reddish mark. It was identical to the one he remembered on his deceased daughter. His legs gave out and he had to sit down. "Doctor, I need to ask you an important question. Is it possible to do a DNA test using old medical records?" "If we kept blood samples from Lucy, yes, it's possible. Let me check our archives." Dr. Watson disappeared for 20 minutes. When she returned, she carried a thick folder. "I have good news. We kept blood samples from Lucy from her last vaccinations. We can do the comparison, but it will take 3 days to get results." "Do it," Ethan said without hesitation. "I need to know the truth." While they waited for the results, Violet gradually improved. The fever subsided, but the tremors continued. During her second day in the hospital, they received an unexpected visit. And Miller, a social worker from Child Protective Services, introduced herself. She was a serious woman around 40, with a folder full of official documents. "Mr. Reynolds, we received a report about a minor in an irregular situation," she said, reviewing her papers. "The child does not appear in our adoption records, nor are there documents proving her legal identity." "She's my daughter," Ethan replied firmly. "That remains to be seen. Meanwhile, the minor must remain in state custody until her legal situation is clarified." "No!" Violet cried from the hospital bed. "You're not taking me again. I found my family." The social worker looked at the child curiously. It was clear there was a strong emotional bond between her and Ethan. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm giving you 72 hours to present documents proving paternity. If you don't, I'll be forced to take her." After the social worker left, Ethan immediately called Greg. "I need you to investigate everything about Dr. Thorne, his clinic, his employees, his finances, everything. I have 72 hours before they take Violet." "I'm already on it," Greg replied. "I found something interesting. Dr. Thorne has properties registered under different names. One of them is a house in the Blue Ridge Mountains." That night, Clara finally emerged from her room. She had overheard the conversation about the social worker from the stairs. For the first time in months, she went to the kitchen and prepared homemade soup. She arrived at the hospital near midnight, when Ethan was sleeping in the chair beside Violet's bed. The child was awake, looking out the window. "Hello, Mommy," Violet whispered, seeing her enter. Clara approached slowly, her heart pounding. She sat on the bed and, for the first time, touched the child's hand. Are you really mine?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "I've always been yours, Mommy. I just got lost for a while." Clara hugged Violet and cried as she hadn't cried since Lucy's funeral. But these were different tears. They were tears of hope. "Tomorrow, I'll play the piano for you," she promised. "Would you like that?" "I'd love that, Mommy. But, could you also play for Lucy? She wants to hear you too." Clara shivered, but didn't let go of the child. If there was even the slightest chance her other daughter was alive, she would do everything necessary to find her. Part 7. Twins Reunited. A Conspiracy Uncovered. The next day, the DNA results arrived. Dr. Watson called them into her office with a grave expression. "The results are conclusive," she announced. "Violet is Lucy's identical twin sister. They are genetically the same person." Ethan and Clara embraced while Violet smiled from her wheelchair. "Now will you believe me when I tell you where my sister is?" the child asked. Clara couldn't stop trembling as she held the DNA results in her hands. The letters blurred through her tears, but the words were clear. 99.9% genetic compatibility. Identical twins. "I don't understand," she murmured. "How is it possible that we have two daughters if I was only told about one?" Ethan hugged her tightly while Violet watched them from her hospital bed. The child had improved considerably but still needed medical observation. "Mommy," Violet said softly, "do you remember when you had me in your belly? We always moved together." Clara approached the bed and sat next to her daughter. For the first time in days, her voice didn't tremble. "Yes, I remember, my love. During the pregnancy, I heard 2 heartbeats, but Dr. Thorne told me it was normal, that sometimes you hear double due to the baby's position." "And after the birth?" Ethan asked. "What exactly happened that night?" Clara closed her eyes, trying to recall details she had blocked due to grief. "It was very confusing. I lost a lot of blood and fainted several times. When I woke up, Dr. Thorne told me there were complications. That the baby was born fine, but then it had respiratory problems and died." "Did you see the body?" asked Greg, who had arrived minutes earlier with new documents. "Only for a moment. I was very weak and sedated. The doctor said it was better not to see her for too long, that it would hurt me more." Clara broke down. "I was so young, so naive. I believed everything." Violet took her mother's hand and squeezed it tightly. "Don't feel bad, Mommy. He tricked many families. I know because I heard them talking on the phone." Greg approached with his notebook open. His investigations over the past few days had uncovered disturbing information. "Clara, I need you to tell me something important. Did Dr. Thorne ask you to sign a lot of papers after the birth?" "Yes, tons. I could barely keep my eyes open, but he insisted I sign everything immediately. He said it was for hospital legal matters." "Did he explain what those papers said?" "Not really. He just said they were death certificates, medical permits, things like that." Clara frowned. But there was something strange. A man arrived that night and spoke to the doctor in a low voice. "I pretended to sleep, but I heard them mention money." Ethan felt his blood run cold. What kind of man? Well-dressed, in an expensive suit. He gave Dr. Thorne an envelope, and they left together. Then the doctor returned alone and told me to sign more papers. Greg exchanged a significant look with Ethan. Their suspicions were being confirmed. "Clara, I believe that night you didn't just sign death certificates. You probably unknowingly signed parental rights relinquishment documents." "What does that mean?" she asked in alarm. "That you legally gave up one of your daughters. Dr. Thorne made you believe she had died, but in reality, he handed her over to another family." Violet sat up in bed, agitated. "That's what happened with Lucy." She tells me in dreams that they took her to a place with many doctors. There are other children there too, all separated from their families. The room fell silent. The magnitude of what was being revealed was overwhelming. "Greg," Ethan said firmly, "I need you to get me an appointment with Dr. Thorne." Unannounced. I don't think it's a good idea to confront him directly. If he suspects we know anything, he could destroy evidence or what? Or he could harm the children he still has, including possibly Lucy. Clara stood up abruptly. "Are you saying my other daughter might be alive?" "It's very likely, Mr. Reynolds. Based on the payments I found and what Violet has told us, I believe there's a child trafficking network disguised as a medical clinic." Violet began to cry, not from sadness but relief. "You'll believe me now. You're going to look for Lucy. She's so scared. The doctors give her injections that make her sleep a lot, and she lives in a room without windows." Ethan knelt beside his daughter's bed. "I promise we'll find her, but you need to tell us everything you remember from your dreams with her. She's in a big house in the mountains. There are many children, but they're separated in different rooms. Lucy says she hears other babies crying at night, and a man with a beard comes to check on them with machines." "Machines? Like the ones at the hospital, but bigger. They take a lot of blood and write numbers on papers." Greg scribbled notes frantically. Everything pointed to some kind of illegal medical experimentation. At that moment, the door opened, and Dr. Watson entered with a worried expression. "Ethan, I need to talk to you urgently. I just received a very strange call from Dr. Thorne. He specifically asked about Violet and wants to know her current health status." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, obviously, but it seemed suspicious that he would call after 5 years. And there's something else. I checked the files from that night again and found something I had overlooked." She pulled out a folder and showed a yellowish medical sheet. "This is your birth record, Clara. Clearly says, twin pregnancy, 2 fetuses detected. But in the final report signed by Dr. Thorne, only 1 birth is reported." Clara slumped into the chair. The truth she had suspected for 5 years was finally before her. "My 2 daughters are alive," she whispered. "They're both alive, and I have to find them." Can you imagine the shock and a mother's renewed hope? How would you feel if you discovered such a profound deception? Share your emotional reactions in the comments. Part 8. The Constellation of Hope. Ethan's study had become an operations center. Maps, photographs, documents, and phone numbers covered every available surface. Greg had installed a whiteboard where he connected clues with red threads, like in detective movies. "Look at this," Greg said, pointing to a series of bank transfers. "Dr. Thorne has received monthly payments from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands for the past 8 years. We're talking millions of dollars." Ethan studied the numbers while Clara fed Violet homemade soup. The child had returned home from the hospital 2 days earlier but still tired easily. "Who makes those payments?" Ethan asked. "That's the problem. The account belongs to a shell company called the Genesis Research Foundation. Officially, it doesn't exist, but I found something interesting." Greg unfurled a series of printed photographs from the internet. This foundation is mentioned in several international scientific articles on genetic studies in twins, specifically research on how environment affects development when twins are raised separately. Clara looked up from the soup bowl. "Are you saying they used our daughters as an experiment?" "It's possible. Identical twins are perfect for these types of studies because they have the same DNA. If you separate them and raise them in different environments, you can study which characteristics come from genes and which from the environment." Violet stopped eating and looked at the adults seriously. "The doctors always tested us. They took me to a white room once a month. They made me draw, solve problems, run on a machine. And they always asked if I dreamed of someone." "What did you tell them?" Clara asked. "That yes, I dreamed of my sister, but they got angry and gave me more pills. They said the dreams weren't real." Ethan knelt beside his daughter. "Violet, do you remember anything else about that place? What was the room like where they tested you?" "It had many cameras on the ceiling, and there was a big window where other doctors watched us and wrote things. Once I saw a girl who looked a lot like me, but she had longer hair. Do you think it was Lucy? Yes, I'm sure. I tried to talk to her, but there was glass between us, and she couldn't hear me. She was very sad. Greg made a note. Do you remember when that was? About 2 months ago. After that, they didn't take me for tests anymore. Eleanor and Robert started fighting a lot about money, and one night I heard Robert yelling that they weren't paying him enough anymore. That's why you decided to escape, Ethan concluded. Yes, I knew if I didn't come now, maybe I would never be able to. The house phone rang, interrupting the conversation. Ethan answered cautiously. Hello, Mr. Reynolds? This is Dr. Watson. I have urgent news. Dr. Thorne just arrived at my clinic asking about Violet. He says it's a medical emergency and he needs to see her immediately. Ethan felt his heart race. What did you tell him? That Violet is no longer under my care. But he got very nervous and aggressive. He insisted I give him your address. I didn't, obviously, but I'm worried. Thanks for the warning, doctor. We'll take precautions. Ethan hung up and looked at Greg with alarm. Thorne is looking for Violet. This is getting dangerous. At that moment, the phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Ethan hesitated before answering. Hello, Mr. Reynolds? A woman's voice he didn't recognize said, You don't know me, but I know who you are and why you're looking for information about Dr. Thorne. Who is this? My name doesn't matter. What matters is that your daughter Lucy is alive. And if you want to see her again, you need to listen very carefully. Ethan desperately signaled Greg to record the call. I'm listening. Dr. Thorne is losing control. He knows Violet escaped and that you're investigating. Tomorrow he's moving all the children to another location. If you don't act fast, you'll lose Lucy forever. Where is my daughter? In a safe house in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'm going to give you the address, but you have to get there before dawn. After that, they won't be there anymore. The woman dictated a specific address and hung up without further explanation. Ethan, Clara, and Greg looked at each other in silence. It could be a trap, Greg said. Or it could be our only chance, Clara replied. We can't let them take Lucy again. Violet got off her chair and walked towards her parents. I'm coming with you. Lucy needs me. She's scared, and only with me will she feel safe. It's too dangerous, my love, Clara said. But she's my twin sister. We're two halves of the same person. Without me, she won't want to leave with you. Ethan looked at the clock. It was 10 at night. They had less than 8 hours until dawn. Greg, call your police contacts. We need an official operation for this morning. I'm already dialing, Greg replied. But, Ethan, if this goes wrong. It won't go wrong, Clara interrupted with determination. We've been separated from our daughters for 5 years. Tonight, that ends. Part 9, The Rescue Mission. At 3 in the morning, 3 unmarked police SUVs sped along the winding mountain road towards the Blue Ridge Mountains. In the second vehicle were Ethan, Clara, and Violet, accompanied by Commander David Hayes, a veteran of rescue operations. Remember, the commander said, checking his gear, this is a child rescue operation. Our priority is the children. If there's resistance, leave it to us. Violet was nestled between her parents, but her eyes remained alert. During the drive, she had drawn a map from memory of the house where she had seen Lucy in her dreams. The main entrance has 2 guards, she whispered, but there's a back door that leads to the kitchen. It's easier to get in there without being seen. Are you sure, my love? Clara asked. Very sure, Mommy. I've dreamed of that house many times. I know exactly where Lucy's room is. The commander studied the child's drawing with professional interest. Despite being childish sketches, it showed precise architectural details, locations of windows, doors, stairs. If this is correct, we have a significant tactical advantage, he told Ethan. But I want to be clear. You stay in the vehicles until we secure the perimeter. No, Violet protested. Lucy won't want to leave with strangers. She needs to see me to know it's safe. The child is right, Commander, Greg interjected. Twins have a special connection. If Lucy is traumatized, seeing her sister could be the key to calming her down. At 4:30, they reached the area. The house loomed imposingly against the starry sky, surrounded by tall trees and a stone wall. Lights were on in several windows, confirming activity inside. The commander divided his team into 3 groups. The first group would surround the property, the second would enter from the front as a diversion, and the third would access the rear where the children would be. "We detect movement," one of the agents reported over the radio. "There are at least 6 adults inside. 2 are loading boxes into a van. They're preparing to flee," Ethan murmured. "We have to act now." The operation began at 5 o'clock. The agents at the front knocked on the main door, identifying themselves as police. Immediately, shouts and hurried movement were heard from inside. Meanwhile, the rear team, accompanied by the Reynolds family, quietly entered through the kitchen, just as Violet had suggested. The child guided the way with a certainty that astonished the adults. "This way," she whispered, pointing to a side staircase. "The children's rooms are on the 2nd floor." They climbed in single file, flashlights off not to alert anyone. Upon reaching the upper hallway, children's voices were heard crying, and adults frantically trying to calm them. "They're moving the children," one of the agents alerted over the radio. Violet broke free from Clara's hand and ran to a door at the end of the hall. "Lucy," she cried. "It's me, it's Violet." From inside, a gasp was heard, and then a child's voice. "Violet, is that really you?" The agents broke down the door. Inside was a room with 4 hospital beds. In one of them was a girl identical to Violet, connected to medical monitors. In the other beds were 3 smaller children, all looking weak and scared. Lucy extended her arms towards her twin sister. "I knew you'd come for me." The 2 girls hugged as Clara and Ethan watched the scene with tears in their eyes. It was like looking in a mirror, 2 parts of the same soul reuniting after 5 years apart. "Mommy? Daddy?" Lucy said in a weak voice, but full of joy. "I never stopped dreaming of you." At that moment, 2 men in white coats entered, trying to take the other children. The agents immediately stopped them. "You can't take these children," one of the men shouted. "They're part of an authorized scientific study." "Authorized by whom?" Commander Hayes asked. "By the Genesis Foundation. We have international permits." "Those permits are fake," Greg interjected, who had appeared with a folder full of documents. "This is a child trafficking operation disguised as research." While the adults argued, Lucy whispered something in Violet's ear. Her sister nodded and turned to the police. "There are more children in the basement," she announced. "Lucy says the smallest babies are down there." The commander immediately sent a team to the basement. Minutes later, his voice came over the radio. "Commander, you need to come down and see this. We found something beyond what we expected." In the basement, there was a fully equipped laboratory with incubators, computers, medical files, and photographs of dozens of children. On the walls were development charts, genetic comparisons, and behavioral studies. But the most shocking thing was a giant whiteboard titled Project Genesis, Phase 3. It contained names, photographs, and locations of 37 pairs of twins separated at birth. "My God," Clara murmured. "How many families have they destroyed?" In one corner of the laboratory, they found 5 babies of different ages, all seemingly healthy but sedated. One of them couldn't have been more than 6 months old. These babies were separated from their twins just a few weeks ago. One of the detained nurses explained, trying to cooperate. "Their siblings are with adoptive families who don't know twins exist." Commander Hayes coordinated the transfer of all the children to the nearest hospital. Lucy refused to let go of Violet throughout the process. "They're never going to separate us again," Violet promised her sister. "Never again." As the ambulances took the rescued children away, agents arrested 8 adults, including 2 doctors and several caregivers. But Dr. Thorne was not among them. "He escaped 2 hours ago," one of the detainees confessed. "He said things were getting too dangerous and left with all the main files." Ethan hugged his two daughters in the back seat of the ambulance, taking them to the hospital. After 5 years, his family was complete again. But he knew the legal battle had just begun. There were 37 pairs of separated twins and many families who deserved to know the truth. Can you imagine the relief and terror all at once? What do you think will happen to Dr. Thorne? Share your predictions. Part 10. Building a Constellation of Families. Charlotte Medical Center had become a family reunification hub. For the 3 days following the rescue, desperate parents arrived from all over the country, each hoping to find the child they thought they'd lost forever. Lucy was recovering slowly in a room she shared with Violet. Doctors had confirmed that, physically, she was fine, but the years of sedation and isolation had left marks on her emotional development. Doctor, Clara asked the child psychologist treating them, how long will it take for Lucy to adapt to normal life? Every case is different, Mrs. Reynolds. Lucy has been in a controlled environment for 5 years. She'll need time to process that she has a real family, that she can play freely, that she won't be separated from her sister. From the adjacent bed, Violet took Lucy's hand. The two had been inseparable since the rescue. Lucy, tell them what you told me about the other children, she asked her sister. Lucy looked at her parents with wide eyes. Her voice was softer than Violet's, as if she had forgotten how to speak normally. There were many children like us there. They all had twin siblings, but they didn't know where they were. I was the one who had been there the longest. Do you remember any of their names? Greg asked, taking notes to aid in the investigation. There was a girl named Sophia. She was 4 and always asked about her sister Anna. The doctors told her Anna didn't exist, but she insisted she remembered playing together. Ethan exchanged a look with Greg. In the Project Genesis list, they had found the names of Sophia and Anna Miller, separated 2 years ago in Atlanta. Were there more children? Greg continued to ask. Yes, many. A boy named Matthew always drew another boy just like him, and a tiny baby who cried a lot at night. The doctor said she cried because she was sick, but I knew she cried because she missed someone. Clara's heart ached. How many children had suffered the same cruel separation as her daughters? At that moment, Commander Hayes entered with important news. Reynolds family, I have good news and bad news. Which do you want first? The bad, Ethan replied immediately. Dr. Thorne fled the country. We have reports that he boarded a private flight to Argentina last night. It will be very difficult to extradite him. And the good news? Thanks to the files we found, we have located 3 more pairs of twins. 2 families are already on their way to reunite with their children. As if on cue, shouts of joy echoed from the hallway. A young couple rushed towards one of the rooms where a 3-year-old girl had just been brought. It's her. It's our Maria, the mother cried. But we thought she died at birth, the father sobbed. The Reynolds twins peered through the window of their room and saw the reunion. Maria ran towards her biological parents while another girl identical to her was carried by a different couple. Look, Lucy, Violet said, pointing. They also found each other, just like us. Will all separated siblings find each other? Lucy asked hopefully. We're going to do everything we can, Ethan promised. Over the following days, the story became national news. Media outlets covered every reunification, every family recovering a lost child. Ethan and Clara decided to use their influence and resources to create a foundation that would help locate the remaining twins. What are we going to call it? Clara asked as they filled out the legal papers. The Constellation Foundation, Violet suggested. Because twins are like stars that are always connected, even if we can't always see them together. A week after the rescue, an unexpected visitor arrived. The woman who had called anonymously to alert them about the transfer presented herself at the hospital. My name is Eleanor Vance, she said. I was a nurse at Dr. Thorne's clinic for 3 years. I couldn't continue to be complicit in what he was doing. Why did you decide to help us? Clara asked. Because I also lost a child. 10 years ago, I gave birth to twins, but Dr. Thorne told me one had died. Now I know he lied. My other child is out there somewhere, and I need to find him. Eleanor handed them a USB drive with additional information she had managed to copy before fleeing the clinic. Here are the names and locations of all the adoptive families. There are also audio recordings of the doctor's calls with his international contacts. Greg immediately reviewed the information. The files contained enough evidence to prosecute not only Dr. Thorne but the entire international network that financed Project Genesis. With this, we can locate the remaining 34 pairs of twins, he announced. It will take time, but it's possible. That night, as Lucy and Violet slept in their hospital beds, Clara sat beside them. For the first time in 5 years, she played a soft melody on the small keyboard Ethan had brought to the hospital. The girls smiled in their sleep. Music had returned to their lives. You know what? Ethan told his wife. I think we're going to need a bigger house. If we're going to help reunify all these families, we'll need space to host the children while they find their parents. Sounds perfect, Clara replied. This family is just beginning to grow. The next day, the federal public prosecutor's office announced that the Project Genesis case had become an international investigation. Argentina had agreed to collaborate in the capture of Dr. Thorne, and several European countries had reported similar cases. The nightmare had ended for the Reynolds, but their mission had just begun. Part 11. The Endless Constellation, Meaningful Ending. 6 months after the rescue, the Reynolds mansion had completely changed. What was once a silent house filled with sorrow now overflowed with life and hope. Lucy and Violet's laughter echoed from the garden, where they played with other children waiting to be reunited with their families. Daddy, when are Matthew's parents coming? Violet asked during breakfast. Ethan looked towards the living room, where a 6-year-old boy played alone with his toys. Matthew had been rescued 2 months earlier, but his biological parents hadn't yet been located. Greg is investigating some new leads, he replied. Maybe we'll have news this week. The Constellation Foundation had grown faster than expected. Clara had left her job to dedicate herself full-time to the project, while Ethan had assigned several of his employees to work on finding families. Good morning, family, Greg greeted, entering the kitchen with his usual folder, but this time with a broader smile than usual. I have important news. He sat at the table and unfolded several photographs. We found Matthew's twin sister. Her name is Isabella, and she lives with a family in Atlanta. But there's a problem. What kind of problem? Clara asked. The family who adopted her didn't know she was part of Project Genesis. They paid for a legal adoption 5 years ago and love her like their own daughter. When we told them the truth, they refused to believe Isabella had a twin brother. Lucy and Violet looked at each other. They knew exactly what that connection meant. Can we go meet her? Lucy asked. Sometimes, twin siblings recognize each other even if they don't remember. It's a good idea, Ethan supported. If Isabella sees Matthew, maybe it will spark a memory. That afternoon, they traveled to Atlanta. The Harrison family had agreed to the visit after much legal insistence. They lived in a modest but cozy house, filled with photographs of Isabella growing up. Look, Mrs. Harrison said, pointing to the photos. Isabella has always been a normal, happy child. I don't understand why you insist she has a brother. Mrs. Harrison, Clara explained patiently, no one wants to take Isabella away from you. We just want her to meet her brother and for you to know the truth. When Isabella came downstairs and saw Matthew, she froze. The two children looked at each other for a long minute without saying a word. You also dream of the blue room? Isabella asked suddenly. Matthew nodded slowly. And the broken swing in the garden. And the lady who sang us lullabies. That's our real mommy, Matthew exclaimed, running towards Isabella. The two children hugged as if they had only been separated for a few days, not 5 years. The Harrison family watched the scene with astonishment and tears in their eyes. I can't believe it, Mr. Harrison murmured. They really are siblings. After long conversations and with the help of specialized lawyers, they reached an agreement. The Harrisons would retain custody of Isabella, but both children could visit regularly and meet their biological parents when they were located. Back home, Ethan received a call that would change everything. Mr. Reynolds? "This is Commander Hayes. We have Dr. Thorne." "You arrested him?" "Better than that. He surrendered voluntarily at the Mexican embassy in Buenos Aires. He says he wants to cooperate with justice and reveal all the details of Project Genesis." "Why did he change his mind?" "Because of his granddaughter. A week ago, he discovered that his own daughter had given birth to twins 2 years ago, but the doctors told her one had died. It turns out the deceased baby was sold through the very same network he managed. The irony was cruel but perfect. Dr. Thorne had become a victim of his own system. 2 weeks later, in a meeting room at the public prosecutor's office, Dr. Thorne confessed everything in front of the affected families. He had created Project Genesis after being contacted by European researchers who needed twins for genetic studies. "At first, I thought I was helping science," he said, his voice broken. "But then it just became a business. We separated twins at birth, sold them to different families, and charged for the comparative studies." "How many children were affected?" the prosecutor asked. "In total, 74 pairs of twins over 8 years. Some are already teenagers, others are just babies." Clara felt her breath catch. 148 children had been separated from their siblings and families. "I have all the files here," Dr. Thorne continued. "Names, locations, adoptive families, biological parents. Everything you need to reunify all the families." Upon leaving the hearing, Ethan and Clara felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the task ahead. "That's too many children," Clara murmured. "How are we going to find them all?" "One step at a time," Ethan replied. "How did we find our daughters?" "With patience, love, and never giving up." That night, as Lucy and Violet slept in their shared room, Ethan and Clara made plans to expand the Constellation Foundation. They would need more staff, more resources, more temporary shelters. "You know what gives me the most hope?" Clara said as she watched her daughters sleep. "That every twin we find brings us closer to the ones who are missing. It's like we're completing a constellation, star by star." 74 pairs of stars," Ethan murmured. "Some are already shining together again, and the others are still waiting for us to find them." On the wall of the girls' room, Violet had taped a map of the night sky. Every time a pair of twins was reunified, she would stick 2 golden stars on the map. There were already 23 pairs of stars shining together. 51 more to go. But the Reynolds knew they wouldn't rest until all the lost stars found their place in the constellation. A year after the rescue, Ethan watched from the study window as his daughters played in the garden with 6 other children. The mansion had become a temporary home for twins waiting to be reunited with their families, and the sound of children's laughter had forever replaced the silence that once inhabited it. "Daddy, come see this," Violet shouted from the yard. Ethan went down and found the 2 girls sitting under the big oak tree, surrounded by letters and photographs. They had been organizing the daily correspondence that arrived at the Constellation Foundation. "Look," Lucy said, showing a handwritten letter. "Mrs. Carmen wrote to tell us she found her son Peter after 12 years apart." 12 years. Ethan took the letter and read it. He thought Project Genesis had only lasted 8 years. "Greg says the Dr. Thorne started earlier than he confessed," Violet explained. "There are older cases we're just discovering." Clara came out of the house carrying a tray with lemonade for all the children. Her transformation had been remarkable. The depressed woman who didn't touch the piano had become the energetic director of a foundation that now had offices in 5 states. "How are we doing with this month's statistics?" she asked, sitting next to her daughters. "Greg says we've reunified 52 pairs of twins," Lucy replied, consulting a notebook where she kept track. "And we have solid leads on another 15 pairs. That means there are." Ethan did some mental calculations. 7 pairs left, Violet completed. The most difficult cases. The last cases were always the most complicated. Twins whose biological parents had died, internationally adopted children, families who had moved without a trace. But the Constellation Foundation had developed a network of investigators, lawyers, and volunteers who didn't give up easily. "I have news," Greg announced, arriving with his usual folder. but this time with a wider smile than usual. We just received confirmation from Spain. The Martinez twins have been located. The girls screamed with excitement. The Martinez twins had been one of the toughest cases. Separated at birth 10 years ago, one adopted in Madrid and the other raised by his grandparents in a small town in rural Kentucky. When are they going to meet? Clara asked. The Spanish family arrives next week. They're going to stay for a month in the US so the children can get to know each other and decide how they want to manage their relationship in the future. That night, during the family dinner that now included 8 children and 3 adoptive parents who had decided to stay close to the foundation, Ethan made an important announcement. Today, we received a proposal from the federal government. They want to convert our model into national public policy. This means we could help not only Project Genesis cases but all children separated from their families in the country. The adults at the table exchanged hopeful glances. During this year, they had learned that the problem was much larger than they imagined. Does that mean we're going to help more lost children? Matthew asked, who was still living in the house while they awaited news of his biological parents. Exactly, Clara replied. It means no child should grow up without knowing who they truly are. After dinner, when all the children were asleep, Ethan and Clara went up to the twins' room. The walls were covered with photographs of all the reunified families, thank you letters, and in the center, the stellar map Violet had created. Count the golden stars, Clara asked him. Ethan counted them carefully. Each pair of stars represented twins who had been reunited. 67 pairs, he announced. 7 pairs of stars left to find. And we'll find them, Violet murmured from her bed without opening her eyes. All stars belong to a constellation. Lucy sat up slightly. You know what I dreamed last night? What did you dream, my love? Clara asked. I dreamed that all the stars in the sky were twins who had found each other, and they shone so brightly that there would never be dark nights for lost children again. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. His daughters had been through so much pain, but they had emerged with a wisdom and compassion that astonished him every day. I have something to tell you, Clara announced. Today I received a very special call. The girls sat up in their beds, attentive. You remember Eleanor, the nurse who helped us find you? We found her lost son. After 10 years, he's going to reunite with his twin next week. The twins hugged and began to cry tears of joy. Will there be 68 pairs of stars now? Violet asked. Yes, my love. There will be 68. Ethan went to the window and looked up at the night sky. Each star reminded him of a reunited family, a story of pain transformed into hope, a child who had recovered their identity. You know what I think? He told Clara as he watched his daughters fall asleep. I think maybe we'll never find all the answers about why this happened. But we have the most important answers. We have our daughters, we have a mission, and we are certain that every child deserves to know their complete story. Clara approached the piano they had installed in the girls' room and softly played the lullaby she had composed for them. It was the same melody she hummed during her pregnancy when she didn't even know she was expecting twins. Tomorrow we start the search for the last 6 pairs, she murmured. 6 pairs? Ethan repeated. 12 children who still don't know they have a twin sibling waiting for them somewhere. We're going to find them. Yes, he confirmed, hugging his wife. We're going to find them, because this time no one is going to take away what we've rebuilt with love, truth, and hope. On the stellar map on the wall, 67 pairs of golden stars shone in the darkness, reminding everyone that even on the longest nights, there is always light for those who never stop searching. And very soon there would be 74. Did Violet and Lucy's story touch your heart? This incredible tale of twins, separated at birth, reminds us that true love always finds its way back home. The Constellation Foundation and its mission to reunite 74 pairs of twins teach us that no star should shine alone in the sky, and that every child deserves to know their complete story. If this emotional journey made you cry, laugh, or simply kept you glued to the screen, leave us a like to let us know it reached your heart. Don't forget to share this video with someone who also enjoys stories full of hope and family love. If you want to keep experiencing adventures like this, Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any story that touches your soul. And now we want to get to know you better. Where are you watching us from? Write your country in the comments and tell us which part of the Reynolds twins story impacted you the most. We love knowing our community spans the globe,